Good evening, fellow Toastmasters.
Good evening.
Who here owns their own home? Any of you guys homeowners? I always have to say that one of the smartest things, or maybe luckiest things that I ever did was in 1999 to buy a property which is actually across the street from our illustrious Toastmasters organization on Cathedral Street. And I had no intentions in my mind of ever living in this place because when I bought it, I love to describe it as post-war London. It looked like it had been bombed. You could see the remnants of what was originally a beautiful 1850s townhouse, which Mount Vernon is so famous for. But, pardon my French, but it had been so bastardized over the years because it had been, at one point in time, a squirt bottling plant. Then it was a car called a Hupmobile dealership. I had never heard of a Hupmobile until I did some research. And then it became the Reliable Tire Company. So it had all these heavy commercial uses in this wonderful home that probably back in the 1850s was just graced with high ceilings and ballrooms and I imagine elegantly dressed people. I just love to close my eyes and imagine what it must have been like, the scene, hearing those horse clips going down the street and these people with walking sticks and hi-hats coming and going along Cathedral Street. When I got the building, it was owned by Reliable Tire, as I mentioned, and they operated a tire facility out of there, and believe it or not, every room in that house was just used solely for the storage of tires. And on the walls was written different size tires, because what Reliable used to do, for those of you who remember snow tires, in the old days you would take your car to a tire place and they would store your snow tire for you in the summer, and then you'd bring your car back and they would flip-flop them and put your snow tires back on in the winter. Nowadays, we don't do that anymore. Everybody has radials. So the dirt and filth from all these tires was left everywhere in this place. And the weight of all those car tires stacked on those floors had caused some of the major ceiling joists to fail and break. So when I got it, there were walls that were literally still attached at the ceiling, but down below where the floor was, you could actually reach your hand up and underneath to the hallway outside. It was unbelievable. And I bought the building solely for the purpose of having a business in it. My plan was never in a million years to live in it. But I gotta tell you that I feel like I just fell in love with this place. As I said, there were remnants of the 1850s townhouse that this house had been, even with all the abuse and neglect it had gotten. It had never been electrified, it never had plumbing. When I researched it, I found that no one had ever lived there since 1905. So, if anybody has ever been in some old houses downtown, you will sometimes see gas jets in the walls. My house still has that. That was probably the only source of lighting in the rooms, were these wonderful stamped brass rosettes that had a little spigot that came out of them. I wasn't even sure what they were at first until somebody explained it to me. They were the gas jets that lighting would have been attached to. It had 4 of its original fireplace mantles left. There would have been 6 at one time. And they're white marble and they were beautiful. They had been vandalized, but lucky for me, all of these excuse me, scraps of the marble were still in the building. They were just sort of spread out all over the place. Like somebody had sort of disassembled them and carried parts here and there. So it was just like a giant jigsaw puzzle for me. And my life changed, I guess, about 7, 8 years ago, and I found myself deciding that I was going to live in this building. Well, that first year, it was like camping. I slept in a sleeping bag. I had bought a heating blanket, electric blanket, excuse me, to keep myself warm. And I bought one of these cheap $200 like fiberglass showers at Home Depot that was like a curved little affair, and it fit into the corner of one of the rooms, and we just roughed in some crude plumbing to it, so at least I had a shower in there. And I just decided to peck away at this thing, and every night, usually after work, I would spend a few and maybe sometimes a lot of hours working on it, trying to remove what was left of some of these scraps of wallpaper, restore these mantelpieces, and the more and more that I just sort of peeled away, I just found this incredible space that I was so blessed to have owned. The building has 11-foot ceilings in most of the rooms, and the size and scale, width and depth of the rooms, it's hard to put your finger on, but when you walk into these rooms, they're just rich. They're just welcoming. There's something about the way that it was done in the 19th century, I think, that it's just different from today. High ceilings are just, have such a great feel to it. I know what you're all thinking, all that heat goes up and you lose all your heat. It costs more to maintain the environment in these things, but nonetheless, I love those high ceilings. These big, deep plaster moldings run around the perimeter of all the rooms in the house. And where they were damaged from where the windows had been missing at different times in its life and rain had come in, I was able to make rubber molds of some of those existing moldings and recast the bits that I needed and then fit them in. It started to come together, and some friends of mine saw it, I guess about 4 years ago, and said, this is such a great work in progress. Why don't you put this house on the Holly Tour? And I said, well, what is the Holly Tour? Well, a lot of neighborhoods have different tours at Christmas time. In Mount Vernon, although it hasn't done it in a couple of years, maybe starting in the late 60s, they would have these tours where people would open up their houses. And any of you that are kind of like me, a little bit of a voyeur, and you like to see how somebody else lives, well, you can pay a fee and you get to go through maybe 8, 10 houses. And they asked me if I wanted to put this work in progress on the Holly Tour. Well, talk about getting the inspiration of having a deadline to get this thing done. I just put myself into top gear, and I just worked tirelessly. I then called in some helpers, and I subcontracted out some of the work. I definitely had some plumbers and electricians do some of that heavy-duty stuff for me. But what I was left with, I think, was just an incredible thing, and something that I'm so proud of. I love to show it off to people. And one of the things that I love to share with folks, which I guess if anybody was ever interested in what somebody's paid for a property, you can go on the city's directory and you can find out the price of any house. But when I bought that house, the owners were asking $160,000 for it. And I know my father thought I was out of my mind, but I offered him $60,000 and they took it. So here I got this, what today I think is an incredible thing for $60,000. If I ever made one smart financial investment in my life, it was this house. I love being a homeowner, and if those of you who are not, I really encourage you to try it. Madam Toastmaster of the Day.